You're listening to the Like and Follow podcast presented by Milk Bar Digital.
Welcome to Like and Follow, a podcast exploring social media and digital marketing presented by Milk Bar Digital. I'm Ben, and on this episode, we're talking about using video and non-video content on social media. And to talk more about that, I've got two of my best friends from Milk Bar. I've got Katina.
Hello.
And I've also got Bea joining us.
Hello.
So we wanted to do an episode about the benefits of using video content over non-video content. And I think first up, what can video do that still photos can't? Bea, we'll start with you first.
I think so much, but the main thing is that it can communicate so much more information than a still can through multiple frames and images. So when we talk about video, we don't even just talk about, a highly produced video that you have to, plan and shoot. It could be something as simple as a GIF of a few photos moving at once. And it just means that instead of putting a single image out there, you've suddenly put 5 or 10.
I think with a still photo, you can really only communicate one thing. Kind of off the back of Bea's point, you can communicate a lot more through video. So it allows you to tell a story. It allows you to share a lot more with your audience. It allows you to really give your customers an insight into your brand as a whole. So instead of them just receiving a short snippet about your product, you might include more about your brand story. You're able to kind of show them the journey of your product being made. You're able to give them a lot more information to give them that insight into your brand to make them feel more connected with your brand.
Well, that's it. That's why we do social media. And I think the other, on top of Katina's point, is that because so many brands are now on social media, it's kind of like the opportunity to grasp someone's attention and hold it. You really only have a couple of seconds. So with video, you have so much more opportunity to grab that attention and also to hold it for as long as possible. They can engage with your content for much longer than just viewing a single image.
Katina, what sort of things are we looking for when we're looking for how video is measured?
Yeah, there's quite a few things. So I guess if you're looking at a still, for example, you can see how many people that still image reached. You can have a look at the comments on that post, the likes it received, how many shares it received. But when you look at a video, there's a lot more for you to have a look at. So you can have a look at things like how many people watched this video with the sound off, how many people are watching the first 3 seconds, the first 10 seconds, how many people are watching it in its entirety. So there's a lot of different things that you can look at with the video to find out particular drop points. So maybe parts of your video, your story are more compelling than others. And it can help you really tailor that content the next time you create it.
Just from experience in this agency, we've noticed that using video content for your advertising usually results in wider reach and kind of a preference to use that creative over a still, just based on Facebook's algorithm. And as well as that, Facebook also allows a lot of retargeting opportunities for video that they don't allow for stills. So for an example, you can specifically target audiences that have seen one video. So you can pick that video and retarget people who've watched it, whereas you can't do that for a post. You can't say, if they've seen this post, I want them to then see another post.
When we talk about building a funnel, is you want to be able to retarget sort of the same sort of audience, or even going after a new audience would be really helpful.
Yeah, like lookalike audiences especially. So if you want to find people who've watched that video and people who look like the people who've watched that video, the opportunity is kind of endless with that.
Obviously, video exists on a wide range of platforms. We've got Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, a whole bunch of platforms. YouTube is primarily video platform as it is. Do you think the idea of tailoring your video to a certain platform works better when you're talking about, say, Facebook and Instagram? Katina, I'll get your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you can probably imagine your own sort of consumption of videos on social media. Typically, you're going to be more willing to watch them when you're on somewhere like Facebook than you would be on Instagram. I think if you kind of imagine yourself, you mainly only follow your friends and brands that you're possibly really, really interested in on things like Instagram. It's a lot more of a personal sort of experience. So you might not want to watch a random video for a random brand that you've never heard before on that platform. Or if you do, you might only want it to be a quick short snippet. Whereas something like Facebook, you're more likely to be tagged in a video from a friend and you're more willing to watch something that's a lot longer to tell more of a story.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's also not just like the content you want to see, but how that content is presented as well. So like the ratios are all different for all of those platforms, and kind of like the viewing behavior is a lot different. Whether people like to view with sound on or off totally depends. Who would watch a YouTube video with sound off? Nobody. But on Facebook, probably 90%. So that's always something to consider. And kind of like the different functions, Instagram will loop a video automatically, Facebook will not. Facebook has a progress bar, Instagram does not. So those sorts of things really impact the kind of content and the kind of the format even of the content.
Do you think that makes much of a difference when you're coming up with ideas for content? Say we're looking at base level, we have an idea for a bit of content and we decide to go with a video. Do you think that we need to make a separate one for a Facebook and for an Instagram?
Not necessarily. It can depend. So if it's a completely different concept, then yes. But sometimes it might just be being a bit more clever in the way that you're filming things. So taking a step back so you can crop that same footage in more than one way. But of course, if you're doing something very complex, then you probably will need to have a different idea.
And I feel like it's worth like more and more thinking about, but maybe not only for Facebook, Instagram, but especially if you're starting to involve something like TikTok or YouTube, which are very different social media platforms, that you are thinking about like the purpose of why people watch videos on these platforms. So like, I guess maybe what Katina was saying before, like on Facebook, it's about really connecting with your friends and family through video, but on TikTok, it's more about jumping on a trend or making people laugh or appearing really cool, you know, like that motivation is different. So it's important to think about, and that will change your content as well.
You definitely wouldn't be able to take something like a regular brand video and then just stick it up on TikTok and think it works. Like that's a completely different platform with a completely different target market. So that is definitely an example of where you'd have to change your video content to suit the platform.
Speaking of TikTok, we've seen a big increase in users on that platform, and it's pretty much taken the world by storm. A lot of their content is the vertical video taking up the full screen. Do you think that's had an impact on how video exists on other platforms like an Instagram or a Facebook?
Totally. It's very interesting because people always talk about TikTok as like the new Vine. That's kind of how people describe it to those who've never heard of it before. And I think it's kind of incorrect because first, you're right, like the size of the video is totally different and so many more little effects that you can put on it. But most specifically, it's the fact that it's long form. It's not limited to that short 7 seconds, was it, for Vine that you had to stick to. And I think it's kind of this trend that Katina and I talked about earlier, which is not earlier, I guess, that Katina and I have discussed in the past about how we think video is more and more, it's getting longer and longer on all social platforms. So not just TikTok. But Instagram, Facebook, like Instagram introduced IGTV, which is their long form alternative. So it's the idea that people are totally willing now to sit for an hour to watch something on a social media platform, which is something that I guess was only really reserved for YouTube consumption in the past.
I hope that it pushes vertical video a bit more forward because typically even now when we do videos, we usually have to do a different crop for an Instagram story because it's actually the full screen versus if you're posting it on the Instagram feed or the Facebook feed, you're only going to get a slightly shorter version of that video. It's still not that full screen effect that we're getting on platforms like TikTok. So hopefully by understanding that that's actually what people want to see these days, they want a video to take up the whole screen and they don't want to rotate it anymore, that other platforms start realizing that and start bringing that into their platforms.
Do you see this as sort of the start of that happening? Do you see that as the way that video is going to move forward?
I think so, especially on platforms where you're probably not as prepared for a video. So again, with YouTube, you're used to it. You're very accustomed to scrolling to find a video and then flipping the phone. But that's because you're already in the mindset of, I want to go and watch a video. But if you're on a platform like Facebook or Instagram where you're just scrolling throughout the day, or you're looking for something that isn't a video, if you see a video, then it's going to feel a lot more natural for you to watch it. Whereas if you're then forced to kind of rotate it, it might kind of break that, the smooth, I guess, transfer into that video.
So we're talking a lot about video content on social, and we sort of thought it would be a good idea to look at a couple of brands that are doing really well in terms of case studies. But I think you had a couple that you wanted to take a look at a bit closer.
Yeah, I have two brands, one on Instagram that I think is doing amazing content and one on Facebook. And I guess like how they're quite different, but also quite similar. So one of the brands that I think is doing amazingly on Instagram is Go-To Skincare. They're an Australian skincare brand. They have amazing presence on Instagram and quite a strong following. They really utilize video content both on their feed and also through IGTV. And the thing I really wanted to, I guess, discuss about Go-To is how they really use their founder, so Zoe Foster Blake, as like a personality to really drive the brand. And that's something that I've seen a lot with video content for brands. And actually kind of what we use for a few of our brands as well is to use people, real humans who are working in the brand to represent the brand through long form video content. Because I think it's kind of like how, I guess, YouTubers create their following. It's about personality more than anything. It's about connecting to a person and their story and their expertise. And that's what brings audiences back, and that's what makes them engaged.
Definitely. I think with more and more brands popping up all over social media, a lot of them can look the same. So one way to really, I guess, create a connection between you and your customers is to show the face behind a brand. And what better way than to do that with the video? They get to, see how someone talks. They get to know their expressions. It just makes the whole thing a lot more personal than just seeing a photo of someone holding a product.
Do you find that the idea of a personality being used in video is more effective on Instagram rather than another platform like Facebook?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think so. Because I think that it's much easier on Instagram when you visit a profile to sort of immediately see connection between posts and view series-based content easily. So you can sort of have highlights that collect posts into one kind of idea or story, or you can use a particular thumbnail detail to sort of see on the feed where a series might continue. Whereas on Facebook, the only way to view content is really like instinctively to scroll down a brand's wall. Like you can click video and then see playlists, but I think it's less of a natural behavior for a viewer than on Instagram.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's pretty unlikely these days that we follow brands and then are actually even curious enough to click onto their wall and sort of explore more unless we're really interested in a brand. Whereas with Instagram, you typically see new brands popping up all the time and you are quite curious. You want to take that extra step to go over and have a look at their feed and find out more.
Yeah, you'd always scroll down and sort of see more than one piece of content before deciding to follow. Whereas on Facebook, you might just be fed a really cool post and just click like and kind of never really think about them again potentially.
I guess that makes a lot of sense with the differences in those platforms being as vast as they are. It kind of makes a lot of sense that a video and personality based content would work a lot better on Instagram. In terms of Facebook, which one are we sort of looking at here to sort of dissect better?
So this one's an interesting one because I guess the idea of brand might be debatable. It's almost more of a news outlet, but I think news outlets in particular are using video very well on their socials. It is a media company called Sixth Tone, and they are a Shanghai-based media company. And they just do amazing human interest pieces on Facebook about the lives of, I guess, like the contemporary person living in China. And And I guess they're just one example, but I do think that pretty much all media outlets nowadays are really looking at interesting ways to package stories for social media consumption.
Do you think that has more to do with the idea of what the platform is in Facebook, or do you think they're looking at it more as a journalistic usage of Facebook?
I think it could be both, because videos, like we mentioned at the start of the podcast, have higher potential to get that reach and engagement than what news outlets would have done in the past, which is just link their stories on Facebook and hope that it gets somewhere. So promotional wise, it would help their brand just to like gain a following and gain recognition for their journalism. But also because, again, video has so much potential to communicate more than a post or a photo or even an article. So it's also a way to tell the story and have it heard by more people.
Now, we mentioned earlier that there are differences in the audience when it comes to watching video on different platforms. You did mention that it's very hard for somebody to get onto YouTube and decide not to watch a video with sound. That does seem to pose a bit of a problem, though, on Facebook. How do we sort of combat the idea that maybe there are people that don't want to watch a video with the sound on?
I guess if it is that really informative piece that you want to go out with, that you do need to add something like captions or subtitles, because if it is something that you really want people to follow the story of, they are going to need to have that there. And there's a lot of different softwares out there to make this quite easy and quite affordable also. So it's not something that you will manually have to sit there and type out yourself. It is quite an easy thing to implement. So it's really interesting if you actually have a look at videos and you see the percentage of people who've watched without sound. So if you're not doing that, then you're really potentially missing out on a lot of people who are interested.
Yeah, and I think that Sixth Tone does this especially well, because as well as captioning all of their photos, they also add very very eye-catching supers onto their videos. So for example, if it's about, a story about amazing noodles that in Beijing, for example, they would have these supers that kind of almost resemble a BuzzFeed clickbait. You know what I mean? Like, world the most amazing noodles. You wouldn't believe that kind of language, or like I don't know, like a bowl of noodles, only $12, or like they have like all these things that come in and out of the video, so that you basically you don't need to listen to it at all, because you're almost reading an article, but it's moving. Well,
I think we've covered quite a lot of interesting points here in terms of how video can help enhance your presence on social media. I want to thank both of you for joining me today for this episode of Like and Follow. If you're looking to upgrade your online content and get a leg up with video, Milk Bar Digital is here to help. You can get in contact with us at hello@milkbardigital.com.au, and remember to like and follow us on all of the socials at Milk Bar Digital.